we're very happy to welcome you to this innovative session that we've actually decided to put on for this year. We hope it is the beginning of a lot of things like this. As you know, we recently held what we call a town hall meeting, coming out of a decision by BAPE in particular, that we felt that there was time for the technically minded people in Barbados to become more involved in having a voice on national issues. So we had two unprecedented hurricanes, Hurricane Havoc in multiple Caribbean islands during the 2017 hurricane season. This unusual season was predicted with nearly 100% accuracy by a certain Professor David Dilley, who is a senior research and prediction scientist for GWO, Global Weather Oscillations. This is an organization that this is their business, is what they do, weather science. It was interesting that they made this prediction at a time when the traditional weather scientists were predicting a regular, normal hurricane year last year. GWO claims to be using a unique technology which they call climate pulse technology. And the really interesting thing about all this is that for 2018, they're predicting not a repeat of 2017, but actually a year of increased activity. They're actually predicting a record year for 2018. And this is based on things like the temperature of the oceanic temperatures, and a number of other criteria that they tend to look at to make these diagnoses. Now, when a person who was 100% accurate last year tells you that this year could possibly be worse, it certainly is a time to sit and think a little bit. We all recall the devastation and the subsequent disruptions caused by last year's terrible experiences. And given these serious predictions by people who seem to know what they're talking about for 2018, we felt that we need to take all possible preemptive steps in Barbados to minimize damage in the first place and to reduce subsequent disruptions should such a situation develop in Barbados in the near future, as predicted by these scientists. The BAPE is therefore, and I think I can speak on behalf of the BIA in this regard too, is therefore seriously concerned about the seemingly complacent attitude that we seem to have in Barbados at the national level, that every year we are going to be luckily bypassed. The fact of the matter is that historically, there's been a cycle where we have been impacted by serious hurricanes. It has happened in the past with fairly regular routine that seems to suggest some kind of climatic cycle. And the day will come when it will happen again. There's no question. The only question is when. And judging from the trends and from the predictions and from what happened last year, there can be no better time to start serious preparation.
I've been asked to do a presentation on planning for strong hurricanes. And my intention in this presentation this morning was to, as Mr. Brown has said, set a background, a pattern, a context, and leave it to the technicians to fill in the very technical aspects. One of the, I say, disappointing things about your remit this morning, and it probably doesn't necessarily fit with this group, if there was a more general audience, would have been to talk a little bit more about codes. And I say that against the background that you have pointed out that there is a code, it's available, it's in the public domain, but the general public not using it. And the challenge that probably is there, as much as anything else, is the fact that the significant damages which are least affordable to repair and replace comes in the housing building sector with little or no insurance and everything else. And then the commercial sector and general government sector suffers because the people who should be able to survive and come back and work and get the country going can't because they're concentrating on their home. So it is critically important, I think, that there's a clear understanding of cause. Planning for strong hurricanes, why should we? And my first context is about our history. I think we've all heard God is a black Bajan, and prayer works for us, and so on. But history says, research says, the records say, and we know, and it's just been basically mentioned, there has been a period in which Barbados has been regularly impacted by a number of tropical systems, even if not hurricanes. And for us in the disaster management field, particularly at the meteorological level and so on, well, even for you as architects and engineers, we have to recognize that hurricanes are not only about wind. It's about wind, it's about rain, it's about storm surge. So we can't just concentrate on the wind code and not recognize that we, in a particular type hurricane, we could have heavy rainfall, very heavy rainfall. Dominica saw that, accentuated by its mountains. And we could have storm surge. Maybe we don't have the kind of storm surge impact as the long coast of the US does, but we can have storm surge. We have had storm surge and we have had damage. So again, the historical impact between 1627, 1899, 23 hurricanes, 4 in the 1600s, 5 systems, 2 of which were devastating in the 1700s, and 17 hurricanes or systems in the 1800s. And there were these impacts, the 3 major ones listed there, August 31st, 1675. The description of the August 10th, 1781 is significant. And the August 10th, 1831 hurricane says something. There's an argument among the general public and those who don't know that strong hurricanes don't develop east of us. We know that's not true. I'm going to give you, we see this as the research which the late Dighton Best did suggests that the winds in the 1831 hurricane could possibly have been as much as 200 miles an hour. That would have had to have developed east of us. The more recent story which I'll tell you is this. In 2004, when Ivan approached, on the Sunday before Ivan impacted, Ivan went from a Category 1 at 11 in the 11 o'clock bulletin to a Category 4 in the 2 o'clock mid-afternoon bulletin. And the target in 36 hours after that point was Barbados. When you examine the topography of our landmass, we have a challenge in being able to, we can't expand any further. In fact, I have argued long before they started it that we needed to get Bajans to appreciate that they have to own a piece of the land 2, 3, 4, and I think we've gone as much as 6 stories up now, right? So the location of our home, not only in the context of wind, but in the context of flooding. I'm sure all of you in here are very acutely aware that we've begun to infringe on marginal, well, I say not even marginal, on areas that were flooding when there were cane fields. But we stopped growing canes and we suddenly put in homes in those locations. And every time rain falls in certain locations, houses flood out. You recognize that a lot of the damage came because of termite infestation. Now, there could be a lot of reasons why that happened. You can't maintain it because you don't have the ability to, or there's neglect. You don't pay attention to. But whichever, there is that challenge of maintenance. So planning, in addition to location of home, construction techniques, maintenance, involves having that family plan. What are we going to do? When? Who's going to do it? It involves preparation. It involves surviving the blow, and it involves recovery. And this is another aspect now that is almost totally neglected, the recovery aspects. I hope it isn't neglected by the commercial sector particularly, because if it is, we're in trouble. But it certainly is neglected by homeowners. You know why I say that? Most homeowners who don't have to, because of mortgage, have insurance, don't have insurance. One of the disappointing things about Barbados is that Barbados had community-level emergency preparedness before the world saw it necessary. United Nations and the donor agencies such as USAID, OFTA, and so on, have in recent times, 10 years, maybe a little more, started to promote community preparedness. In 1976-77, Sir Carlisle Burton, the late Sir Carlisle Burton, brought community preparedness in the form of district emergency organizations to Barbados. And it was a good system which worked in all the constituencies, and that has been one of the bugbear. It is based on the constituency level. It is not supposed to be political. But unfortunately, some people do politicize it. So community preparedness is critical. I can't say enough about the business community and the need for the business community to be prepared. I am not happy with national preparation across this region, not only in Barbados. This is not a critique of Barbados per se. It is a critique of the region, but within a context. One of the challenges the region has is finance. And without that particular resource, the governments are constrained in doing all that they could. At the same time, I make this argument to you, and quite honestly make this argument to you too. I am not against education, security, health, infrastructure being supported heavily, but because the region is what it is, a region which is vulnerable to hurricanes, earthquakes, flooding, landslides, and others as well. We need to put a little bit more into the disaster management field to ensure that when and if and when, and probably not if, but when an impact occurs, the resources, the mechanism, the systems are in place to ensure that rollover of a recovery program, to ensure that the losses that could occur because we stutter in our recovery are not exacerbated. So preparedness is not the purchase of items, right? It is that long-term process, planning for home, location, type, construction techniques, and so on. So, just a couple of pictures of Dominica. This is a house, and you can see what has happened to it. Literally totally destroyed, not literally, totally destroyed, 4-inch envelope, 4-inch block envelope, very little connecting steel, and so on. That can be good construction for a country in a hurricane belt. Maybe a little stronger main structure facility, but lost its roof. One of the challenges here was, again, was maintenance. This says it all to a large extent in terms of the destructive nature of Dominica after Maria.
I'm the chairman of the Food and General Supplies Committee. Now, as I said before, it's a standing committee under the DEM, right? And you all know what DEM stands for. And the remit we have is that when we look at disaster preparedness, my slides might be pretty clogged. Eh? When we look at disaster preparedness, we are not only looking at hurricane, we are looking at flooding. We are looking at tsunamis. We are looking at disturbances, riots, and all those things. Any major disaster that hits this country at any time, the Food and General Supplies Committee could be called into action to help supply food to those who are disadvantaged, right? Now, these things fall under the Emergency Powers Act, and you will see that it's all embracing when you speak to disasters, all right? We have a very large committee. The committee span, you will see some names there, starting from school meals, going right down to the Barbados Defense Force and the Barbados Police Force, Ministry of Education, Red Cross, and the whole lot. We have to bring these persons together every year to sit down and to discuss our plans going forward. All right, so you see there is a whole set of ministries and departments there that we have to, when I say we, I'm talking as a subcommittee of a standing committee of the DEM.
Storm preparedness, let me go into some points on storm preparedness. We have a very comprehensive hurricane procedures system in Light and Power. It's reviewed and updated on an annual basis. It documents designated activities and roles such as public information and communication, emergency management, manpower needs, fleet management, coordinators, and we also start our preparedness meetings at the beginning of March of each year. All of our generating stations are designed to withstand Cat 3 hurricanes. And our modern substations, I would have mentioned the 17 indoor subs, those are also designed for Category 3. And we're talking about concrete roofs, storm shutters, reinforced doors, and flood mitigation. As I would have alluded to earlier, the underground transmission network to most of the substations is underground, and it feeds critical loads. We also have a self-insurance fund for T&D and generation assets. And what that fund looks, we have two types of insurance. We have external insurance, where we have external risk assessors come to the company, inspect our assets, and determine the level of risk that the company can handle, and determine insurance based on that. But we also have a self-insurance fund, which has been developed over a number of years, where the company injects its own funds into this fund so that we have quick access or ready access to funding in the event of a catastrophe. And we're also a member of the CARELEC Hurricane Assistance Program. CARELEC is an organization that consists of about 18 utilities throughout the region, and they're geared towards hurricane assistance to member countries. We're actively a participant in that. We currently have a team in Dominica. We would have had teams in Dominica and Anguilla last year, and the year before that we would have had in Bahamas. Storm surge at Spring Garden Generating Plant. Spring Garden was established in the early 1970s, and we would have recently had storm surge studies were performed for our latest plant that was commissioned in 2005, 62 megawatts of heavy fuel oil diesel, and all the floor auxiliaries, all the ground floor auxiliaries are elevated to 4 meters. We also have the Seawell site, which is rated at 73 megawatts of installed capacity, and also that is less vulnerable to storm surge. It is actually right next door to the Grantley Adams Airport. Now, the last point I have here is the possible damage to trench solar PV systems. For systems greater than Category 3, Trent was designed for handling a Category 3 type storm. So again, because of the large surface area, it occupies 44 acres, 44,000 panels. It definitely has a large footprint for damage.
Geographical information system. This is going to be the backbone of a lot of what we do. This is actually a spatial representation of our T&D assets. The red line represents our HT network, and the blue lines represents our LT network. Roger would have spoken about all the different poles and the class poles. In this system, we have a record of all the different poles, where there are the heights, the classes, transformers, different sizes, meters, and our customers are in this system. So pre-hurricane, I don't know if you watch CNN and they have projected path of the hurricane or the disaster. You see the model on CNN. What we can do in our GIS system is leverage that same model, take the passage of the hurricane across the island and see the areas that are susceptible to the most damage. What that can do for us, again, we could decide how to communicate with you. We could decide on engage with Carlette early and say, you know, based on the level of destruction that we see, we may need assistance. We'll be able to communicate with our insurers. We'll be able to communicate with our affiliate group that will help with the restoration. I'll talk about that shortly. So this is kind of we could do pre-planning with our GIS system. The other two, lessons learned from Dominica. In the first thing we're doing now, that is a big win that a lot of other territories probably can't do, is that we're collaborating. Roger spoke about, so there's no communication in Barbados right now. We're painting the picture, no communication like Dominica. What we have now, working with a couple of affiliates, so A, B, C, D, call us Barbados, we have our network, our GIS data stored in the cloud. So anybody can access the data. So here now we have a hurricane, no communication to Barbados. Affiliate A is responsible for doing restoration remotely. What happens then, our pre-assessment we will have sent, they will see how many poles, transformers we have right there, if they're there. And then what they would now do is look at Barbados. They'll be able to know how many poles there, how many transformers, everything. They have that information there already at their fingertips. They could start to engage. The whole idea is, you know, one of the issues facing Dominica is that everybody got hit the same time, and therefore there was this juggling for resources like poles and transformers. So they could start to engage with suppliers here. We have a situation here, we might need X amount of poles, and they could start that conversation early without even knowing what's happening, no communication. Next thing we can do is I have first responder. In the case of the Domla experience, it was global rescue. Again, no communication in Dominica, but communication in Barbados. So say Global Rescue sets up in St. Vincent. What they can do right now, we have an app right now in the App Store with the data on Barbados. They download that app and they come into Barbados and start to do their assessment and do the damage assessment. That damage assessment feeds right into this dashboard here. I'll talk about that dashboard in a little second. So no communication yet with Barbados as yet, and the assessment has started. The conversation with the insurers could start as more accurate data comes in. So coming into Dominica now, the experience we had is about 2 weeks we had communication. Roger showed on the ground in the city area. So say now we start to build up, employee assistance programs in place. Employees say, yes, we arrive at work, we can do assessments. Again, they will have the app on their phone, and they can start the assessment. In the downloaded format, when we get Wi-Fi, go ahead and do the assessments, and it feeds this dashboard. Again, that could be managed remotely until we transition, we get up and run with communication remotely. Affiliate A or C sees this dashboard, start to firm up the conversations on knowing the extent of the damage, how many poles, how many transformers, whatever.